have you noticed, I'm not going to say women, but women are big fans, typically, not always, of the sad stories. You know the ones I'm talking about. Like The Notebook. Who saw The Notebook? Bet you it's going to be a bunch of women who raise their hand. Boo! Boo! I'm not buying it, Simon. Not at all. Something about sad stories. I mean, women are. Think about how many times. No, don't take this seriously, okay? Think about how many times, as a married couple, your wife will change what you said into what she thought that you said, so that she can be sad about something, right? It's just a joke. Don't take it seriously, guys. The way I see it, I say enough stupid things about myself. She doesn't have to invent anything on my part. I don't know about you guys, but, I got it covered over here. But, people it seems like people love the sad stories, the underdog stories. But more than that, there's a lot of stories where people have pretty much a short, miserable life. And so 2 examples that come to mind. One more recent would be A Walk to Remember. Do you guys remember that movie? Okay, talk about a melodramatic. Golly. Okay, so basically, she gets cancer and dies. Oh, sorry, spoiler. She gets cancer and dies. And that's the end of the story. There's no, redemptive arc or anything. There's no, the treatment worked. No, there's nothing. It just ends, and it's just sad. It's terrible. Maybe another example, this one's from, the 1600s or something like that, Les Miserables, which is basically a series of people who have very short, miserable lives. And, if you want something maybe a little bit more real, I was doing a ride for children's cancer research, and 2 of the kids that we were writing for ended up dying the very next year. And, man, it was I had to take the year off from the fundraiser because I couldn't. I couldn't, You're raising money for these kids. You see them, you see, their faces and stuff, and you got to take these updates and these letters, and then to see 2 of them die, I was just like, ugh. So I had to take a break off there. I think that's a perfect example of a short, miserable life. Because these kids, one of them was 4, and the other one was 7. Sorry. Back on track. I think that's the definition of a short, miserable life. And so today we're going to look at Prevailers. And we're going to look at a guy in Genesis who thought that he had a short, miserable life. We're just going to kind of ask Mari what he thought about this, okay? So, just to kind of make sure we're all on the same page, for those people who didn't read through Genesis this year, or this year. I'm already through Genesis, so I don't know what you mean. Yeah. Joke for another time. Anyways, Jacob is the father of the 12 tribes who would become the 12 tribes of Israel. Or I guess 12 sons who would become the 12 tribes of Israel. And one of his sons, Joseph, is sold into slavery. Joseph, after he's sold into slavery, goes on to be promoted. Not just in the prison, but out of the prison, huzzah. And, ends up in second in command in Egypt, brings his family to Egypt to be saved from a famine. And we're going to pick up right after the family is all there together. They've been reunited. The father thought that Joseph was dead, and now he knows he's not. Everybody's reunited. Everybody's happy. Genesis 47. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Now that your father and brothers have come to you, the land of Egypt is open before you. Settle your father and brothers in the best part of the land. Then they can live in the land of Goshen. If you know of any capable men among them, put them in charge of my livestock." So Goshen would be the northernmost Egypt. The Nile floods from south to north, so it'd be the southernmost. The downriver, most downriver part of the Nile you can go. The northernmost part of Egypt, which is in the Mediterranean there. Joseph then brought his father Jacob and presented him to Pharaoh, and Jacob blessed Pharaoh. Pharaoh said to Jacob, "How many years have you lived?" And Jacob said to Pharaoh, "My pilgrimage has lasted 130 years. Now listen, he's about to say something, okay? "My years have been few and hard." Remember that? I was just telling you about the kids dying of cancer and the woman on the movie dying in her 20s or something like that. You guys remember that, okay? So let's back up to the back up here. My pilgrimage has lasted 130 years. My years have been few and hard. Okay? Just wanted to make sure that got through to our heads here. This is not making sense. It does not compute. Does not compute. And they have not reached the years of my ancestors during their pilgrimages. So Jacob blessed Pharaoh and departed from Pharaoh's presence. What in the world is happening here? What is going on? How can he possibly say these things? In fact, there's another part of the story where, so the long story short, they want to take Joseph's younger brother Benjamin to Egypt with them, and the dad says this really funny line. He says, remember, he's not intending to be funny. He's not intending. But he says this. He says, these things always happen to me. Yeah, just, that's funny. Okay, all right. I'll laugh by myself, But, he has this victim mentality all through the story. And let's take a look at his life. Is this claim accurate that he has lived a short, miserable life? Keeping in mind our Les Miserables kind of thing going on we had here. Let's look at this. So just a quick list I've made of the big, major bad things that happened to him in his life. First off, he had his life some family tension, right, between him and his brother. Things did not go well there. Ended up with the inheritance that was supposed to be his brother's. There was a lot of conflict there. Brother wanted to kill him. Had to move out of Dodge. Then he, moves up north, and he's cheated by his in-laws. It's bad enough to having a boss cheat you, but it's even worse when they're in-laws, because what are you going to do, right? That boss, that's my father you're talking about. Well, so cheated by the in-laws. It keeps going, though. Now he has household tension because he's got 4 different women that he is intimate with. And so obviously there's a little bit of household tension there. I've never seen a situation where that would work well. And it didn't work well for him either. Then he had lifelong hip pain. Well, I guess half of his lifelong hip pain. He had his daughter was raped. 2 of his sons slaughtered an entire village. These are big bad things, I would say. Definitely big bad things. He had some loved ones that were very dear to him die. One of which was his favorite of the 4. And she dies. He presumes that Joseph is dead as well. He thinks that he's dead as well. So it seems to him like, all these bad things happen, right? But that would make sense if he only lived about 20 years and all these bad things happened and nothing good happened. But he just said that he lived 130 years. So what is up? Okay, by show of hands, who here thinks that they're going to make it to 130? Yeah, probably nobody here, right? Your parents probably didn't make it to 130. Your grandparents probably didn't make it to 130. So here he is sitting at 130, saying, "I'm young and dying in my prime." Okay, buddy. So let's. What are some good things that happen, or things that are seen as good? Because there is a difference. Sometimes things aren't good, but people in culture typically perceive them as being good. So let's kind of go through. First off, he gained the firstborn inheritance, which he was not the firstborn, and he gained the blessing from that. Okay. All right. He encountered God or his angels, however you want to say that, 3 different times. Once when he was heading north in Bethel, once when he was getting ready to meet his brother coming back down, and then once before he went to Egypt. 3 different times he had these divine encounters. These are kind of big deal. Not everybody experiences those. These are not common things to happen. But it keeps going. He has many kids, so his inheritance is in good standing. There's a good flow of blessings there. It's going to be good there. And now this isn't something that is good. It's something that is seen as good. He had 4 different women in which to, basically, there was one for no matter which one was in a bad mood, he always had another backup plan, right? That's what I'm getting at here. So then it's not a good thing. It's something that is seen by men as a good thing. He was wealthy, which once again, I'm not saying that's good or bad. I'm just saying it is, and it's seen as good. He had his family preserved through a giant famine while his son was elevated in position. These are really good things that are happening to him. His family is reunited. Who has ever lost a child and then later is reunited on earth with them? That doesn't happen. For those of you who have lost a child, you know they're gone. It's end of story. They don't come back. Well, here we have a drastic turn of fortunes, and after he has been reunited with his long-lost son, he still says, I've lived 130 years. It's been a short and miserable life. What is this guy smoking? I don't get it. Let's keep going. No, this isn't the end of it. And then he lived a total of 147 years. So he lived 17 more years past the 130 years when he was talking to Pharaoh. That's a really long time to live. 140 people don't live 147 years. This is an amazing event that has happened. Now, you might say, well, yeah, but back then, no, hold on. At the time that Jacob and Joseph lived, people typically died in their 20s and 30s. If you were lucky, you'd make it to your 50s and 60s. Most of the pharaohs died in their 50s. Some of them died earlier, 30s and such. So this is not a time when people are living hundreds and hundreds of years. But he lived 147 years. Yet he says, my years have been short and miserable. Okay, all right. That's an interesting idea there. So if we were to involve Mari in this business, he would probably say that that is not true, not the father, not good. So what is he talking about? Well, there's two things I want to say. First off, and this is an extremely important lesson. It's such an important lesson. We even have it on the PowerPoint today. The shorter and more selective your memory, the happier you're going to be. So the shorter and more selective your memory is, the happier you're going to be. First off, shorter. If you have a memory going back 20 years about all the people who have wronged you, you're not going to be happy. That's the first thing. Second off, if you don't have a selective memory, because this is what's going to happen. For those of you who are married, has your spouse ever done something that really irritated you? Well, don't answer. Do you have to choose to let it go, or can you just sit there thinking about it over and over again and keep irritating yourself with what they did and still have a good attitude towards your spouse? You see what I'm saying? More selective. The happier you're going to be, definitely. And then there's the issue, along this, that compared to who is his life short and miserable? He says it's short and miserable, and then he says, because my fathers and grandfathers, they've lived a lot longer. That's his basic argument. Okay? So here's the problem with that, though. If he compared himself to the Egyptians, he lived like 4 different generations. Oh, let's see. Yeah, like 4 different generations that he lived in his one lifetime. So it's really, who are you comparing yourself to? See, the shorter and more selective memory you have, the happier you're going to be. He forgot all the good things. He just highlighted on the bad things. Not that we've ever done that, right? Once again, the shorter and more selective your memory is going to be, the happier you're going to be. And we all have disappointments, but there is a big difference between keeping them fresh in your mind, where you're always thinking about all the things that are irritating you and all the bad things that have happened and all the people you've lost and all the conflicts you've had to endure and all the bad, or are you orienting yourself on praise? When I first got here, people had a laundry list of things that they thought were extremely essential for us to do as a church, or to fix. And in every church I've ever been to, there's always people who think that music is the biggest issue. It happened before I was worship pastor, it happened when I was worship pastor, it happened after I was worship pastor. Where people think basically the reason we're not growing is something to do with music. If the worship pastor do this, it would work out right. Now, I'm not trying to say anything about Melissa. I'm saying from my own experience, because I did it for so long. But the truth is, you can have a full band, a full orchestra, full choir, everything's fantastic, and the worship be dead. And you can also have nobody leading worship and it be lit. You know what I'm talking about? And when you're in a service and you're not worshiping because all the stars are not aligned, that's a you problem. See what I mean? I as a worship pastor, I frequently heard people say, well, if you do this song, if we got more or less people on the stage, if, all these different things, and if that happened, then I'd be able to worship. Here's the thing. People who worship, worship. People who worship, worship. And you might say, what does that have to do with this? Because of this. You will either find yourself throughout your life looking at all the bad things and remembering them, and your marriage will suffer for it, or you will find yourself focusing on the good things, and your marriage will endure. We all have irritating things that we do and irritating things that our spouses do, irritating things that our kids do, and things that we do that irritate our kids. But in all those things, the shorter and more selective your memory, the happier you're going to be. I mean, even if you take the example of a rainforest, and I have a picture here on the screen, the rainforest is an amazing thing, because when you think of a rainforest, what do you think of? You think of life. You think of all kinds of different plants. You think probably humidity. But you think there's a lot of things going on there. There's spiders everywhere. There's snakes everywhere. There's things everywhere there. But the rainforest is actually in a constant state of decay. That's why the rainforest soil is so healthy. See, because the rainforest doesn't have the seasons like we do, you don't really have a freezing time where the trees and whatnot can rest. Because of this, it has to be in a constant state of growing and dying in a repetitive cycle. So when you look at something like the rainforest, you expect it to be full of life, but it also is full of death. And it's actually that death that gives it the life. See, and this is why I'm saying this, because some people think it's not that my memory isn't, it's not that I'm remembering the wrong things. That's not the issue. The issue is that I've had so many bad things happen to me. And I get what you're saying. I do. But bad things happening to you does not mean God can't speak to you. It's like this. Let's say you're in the middle of a nasty divorce. I mean a nasty one. I mean, things are not going well. The kids are involved, and it's just a big nasty thing. Okay? Does that mean that you cannot seek God? You cannot read the Bible, you cannot pray? No, nothing has changed to prevent you from doing that. It might be harder to pay attention, absolutely. It might be harder to really focus into what you're studying, that's true. But there's nothing that happens during that process that prevents you. Jacob made his life habit comparing himself to what he didn't have. Read throughout Genesis. Again and again, he constantly compares himself to what he doesn't have. Right? His brother has an inheritance. I want that. His father has wealth. I want that. His father-in-law has wealth. I want that. I want this girl, because, why not? He gets married to his sister, which at that point he should have called it quits and just stayed married to that one. But instead, well, this isn't the one that I love, so I got to get married to that one too. Okay, well, that's not a great idea. Even if it is a good idea to have more than one wife, it's really not a good idea to have two wives that are sisters. That's a really bad idea. That's like marrying a mother and a daughter together. I mean, that's just a really bad idea. Really bad idea. If you want to have problems in your life, do that. So Jacob is a guy who's constantly comparing himself to others, and he's never happy. It doesn't matter what good things happen in Jacob's life. Read through Genesis. He's not happy. He has his son return. He's safe from a famine. His family's all together. He's still saying, my years are short and miserable. What's the deal, man? And the second thing is that happiness doesn't come, and we definitely see this in this story, happiness doesn't come from things, and happiness does not come from events. It doesn't matter if those things or events are good. It doesn't matter if those things or events are bad. Happiness does not come from things or events. Because if it did, Jacob would be just as happy as he was miserable. Right? I mean, didn't he have a bunch of good things that happened to him? Not just the bad things that happened to him, but all he could focus on was the bad things. Happiness doesn't come from things or events, whether they're good or bad. A lot of times we fool ourselves and delude ourselves. I would be happy in the Lord. I would be satisfied. I would be content in life. I would be whatever if God would resolve this issue. Well, it doesn't matter what it is. I have this pain that I wake up to every day. I have this family problem that I have every day. Whatever it is, it really doesn't matter. If God would solve this, then I'd be happy. There's always going to be something else, though. There's always going to be something else. There's never going to be a moment in time where you're like, well, maybe that'll last for about 5 minutes, and my life is really good, and then it's like untangled, and then that moment ended. It's not going to last real long. There's always going to be good and bad going on in life. Just like a rainforest, there's always decay happening. Amidst all the life, there's always decay. So we look at these things, we look at his relationships, his wealth, maybe to transfer it nowadays, illnesses and loss and all these different things, good and bad things that happen. Those things are part of the journey, but they're not worth the whole of the journey. See what I'm saying? There's going to be bad things that happen, and that's fine, but the entire journey is not summarized by this one bad thing, no matter how long or bad that thing is. See what I mean? Well, I had a nasty divorce there for my whole life. No. You had a bad thing that happened in your life. It was hard for you. Okay? Your whole life is not summarized by this one thing. You get what I'm saying? The part does not make up the whole. So what did he miss? What did Jacob miss? And is it really as simple as, well, all he had to do was reorient his perspective. If he just had a better outlook, all of his problems would disappear. Well, no, I'm definitely not saying that. Life is full of a bunch of really bad things that happen. And some of those things are really bad. I mean, I know you guys, I talk to you guys, some of you guys are going through some really bad things. There's no, sugarcoating any of that. But, so I don't think it's as simple of an issue as, well, he just had to reorient his perspective. Because focusing on good is a good thing. But there's this idea that's gotten into the church that if you just focus on the good, good things will be drawn to you. Focus on the good things. Don't don't accept the possibility that something is wrong, and you just keep believing for the best thing and keep hoping and having faith for the good thing, and good things will be drawn to you. Biblically, that's not true. Biblically, we see that happen repeatedly over and over again, where those are poor examples. And also, that is a huge, and I mentioned this on Wednesday, that is a huge slap in the face to anybody who's ever had a kid with cancer. And we talked about this on Wednesday. Do you honestly think that those parents don't genuinely desire that their kids don't have cancer? Do you honestly think that I was the only person who cared about those 2 kids that died? I mean, let's be real here, guys. If it was as simple as you just focus on the good things, of course everything good's going to happen. And you pray for the good things, you believe for the good things. That's silly. It's silly. God says in this life there will be troubles. He doesn't say just deny the problems, deny that you're sick, deny that you have problems going on, and it'll go away. He didn't say that. He never said that. But for whatever reason, there's some things that people believe that even though the Bible says no, that's not what it is, we hold on to it because it gives us a sense of hope. And we're going to look at that more, typically on Wednesday nights, but still. The idea that I want to get you across here is no, it is not as simple of a thing that Jacob just had to change his perspective. It's not that simple. It's never that simple. I mean, it helps. It helps. We were talking yesterday in the class, Terry was there. Diet will help your sicknesses, but it won't cure your sicknesses. It's not like if you just add turmeric to your diet every day, you're suddenly not going to ever be sick again. That's silly. That's not going to happen. And so it's not that simple for Jacob. Definitely not. And what it makes life even more complicated is, did you notice in life that good does not outweigh bad? Did you notice that? Because this is what would happen. If that was true, you would experience good days and then one bad day, and you'd get over it because the sum of the good days would weigh more than the sum of the bad days, right? But it doesn't work like that. You can have 40 good days and then one bad day where somebody you really love dies. And all of a sudden, those 40 good days don't really matter much at all. Am I right? And then what makes it even worse is if you go through a couple different traumatic things back to back, you forget everything good that happened to you. And all you can remember is the bad things. So what am I getting at here? Hold on, just hold your horses. We're getting there, okay? We're getting there. Imagine if you've got 6 kids, 1 of them dies and 5 of them lives. Are you going to be not sad at all because I've still got 5 living kids? No, you're going to be distracted because you got 1 dead one. When you go through times of sickness, are you totally happy and content because you had years of health? Well, typically not. Typically, you look at the years of health and you forget about them. You say, God, why are you doing this to me? Why am I going through this? Right? If there's anybody here, and don't answer, but if there's anybody here who's ever battled cancer, you know what I'm talking about. You go through it, you get a bad diagnosis, and you're like, God, why are you doing this to me? What have I done that you turned your back on me? Why do you hate me, God? What's happened? What changed? And you forget about the good. You go through this like grieving process. And even if you recover, you still go through this grieving process because the old you is dead and a new you has emerged. So you still grieve even when you survive. So it's not as simple as reorienting yourself. And what makes it even worse is you don't really know what's going to happen, good or bad, healing or death. Is God going to hear? Yes, he is going to hear. Is he going to heal? I don't know. Unless God specifically gives you a word that says, I'm going to heal you in this. You really don't know. And most of the time, God doesn't give us that specific word. So we wander through this place of darkness and we think, God, when will you hear? When will you pull me out of the darkness? Well, for Jacob, he's already gotten to the other end of the tunnel. He's been saved from the famine. That happened. His son was restored to him. That happened. He was on the other side. And he's still saying, 130 years, short and miserable. So what in the world is happening here? Happiness doesn't come from knowing what's going to happen, absolutely. Happiness also, and this is something that blows me away every time I think about it, happiness also doesn't come from nothing bad ever happening. You would think if nothing bad ever happened, you'd be happy, and yet, that's not how we work, is it? That's not how we work. So let's go to another part of Genesis where Jacob's going to do this thing, and it's going to say something that I think is very important for what we're looking at, because our basic question that we're asking is, how come Jacob says 130 years are short and miserable, and how can we prevail past these things and all this? So let's look at Genesis 32 now. It says this, Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him. This is before the story that we read before, until daybreak. When the man saw that he could not defeat him, he struck Jacob's hip socket as they wrestled and dislocated his hip. Then he said to Jacob, let me go, for it is daybreak. But Jacob said, I will not let you go unless you bless me. What is your name? The man asked. Jacob, he replied. Your name will no longer be Jacob, he said. It will be Israel, because you have struggled with God and with men, and you have prevailed. Big stuff going on here, and I wish we had more time to unwrap all of it, but let's kind of break it down into pieces. The first thing he says is he says that his name will be Israel, because he has struggled with God. He's struggled with man, and he's prevailed. So he's struggled. He's lived a life of struggle. And I'm going to tell you right now, we are not going to be able to answer the question today. And we're not coming back to it next week. How is Jacob able to say that his life was short and miserable? Rather, we're going to look at the fact, and this is a hard thing to get, I'll tell you now before we get there. You typically are not going to get the answers for the really hard questions. Typically. In that time of struggling in the dark with no answers, you have options. And that's what we're going to look at. We're looking at the options. We're not looking at giving you the cure-all. We're not looking at giving you the answer or the fix or the magical prayer that you pray. We're not looking at that. We're looking at your options in the darkness. That's really what we're looking at. And prevailing. So he calls him Israel because he says that he struggled with God and with man. Did you notice that Jacob's clearest sense of direction came when in times that he was pursuing blessings? Did you notice that? Let's go back in history, okay? Him and his brother, he really wants his brother's inheritance. He has a mission in life. He is pursuing getting that inheritance, right? Well, then his father thinks that he's going to die. He wasn't, but he thought he was about to die. And so he says, hey, him and his mom cook up this plan for him to go in there and fool the dad. He's got a clear sense of direction. Well, then they say, well, your brother's going to kill you. You better head up north. So he goes, and again, he has a clear sense of direction. I'm going to get wealthy. I'm going to get this woman. Right? So then he comes back down, and you just see the guy drifting. He doesn't really have a purpose. He's just kind of wandering around. God tells him, go back to the land that I showed you, and instead he goes by this other area, and his daughter gets raped. So finally, God says, yeah, go back to where I told you to go. And then he goes back, and he's just kind of sitting there. And his kids are doing stupid stuff, like getting sold into slavery and selling their brother into slavery and, all these stupid things that they're doing. And so then he's just kind of sitting there. And then finally it's revealed, hey, by the way, we can't go and get more food because we have to show him Benjamin. He says, only bad things ever happen to me. It's always me. It's always bad things that happen to me. Fine, take Benjamin and go. So he's sitting there pouting. Again, no sense of direction. Then they come and tell him, Joseph's alive in Egypt. And he doesn't even believe this. He's like, whatever, And they're like, no, but seriously, he really is alive. And he's in Egypt. And he's like, well, let me go look. We'll see what happens. And he goes and he encounters God. Again, you see him having a sense of purpose, pursuing the blessing. And then he gets to Egypt, and what happens? Nothing. He just kind of sits there for 17 years until he dies. When you see Jacob having the biggest victories in life, it wasn't when things weren't happening to him. It was when he was pursuing the blessing. This is what I'm saying. I don't have a quick fix for your problem. I have no idea. I can't give you an answer that only God can give you. But I do know that in the darkness, the long, dark tunnel, you have an option to pursue the blessing. But in order to do that, you have to struggle with God and man. And I'm not talking about struggling with God like being blasphemous and that kind of stuff. I'm saying the struggle of your faith that comes, and it shakes you, and you don't know what to do. You don't have the right prayer. You don't even know what prayer is anymore. You don't know if anything you've ever done matters. You have no idea how to get back up. Pursue the blessing. Pursue the blessing. The second thing that he says here in this passage in Genesis 32 is he says, you've struggled, but you have prevailed. You've struggled, but you have prevailed. Amazing. I really wish we had more time to look at this. So Jacob reached places in his life where he stopped striving and he started just kind of coasting. Well, there's nothing really left for me. I'll just go to Egypt. But the interesting thing is, after this situation here where he's prevails against God and man, it's after that he goes and blesses his children. See, there was still more out there to do. He just lost sight of it. To where now he's 130 years old. My life has been short and miserable. Lost sense of the direction, not because times were good or times were bad, but because he was no longer seeking the blessing. The same thing happens to each and every one of us. When we get in a place, hey, I'm good. If you're no longer seeking the blessing, guess what? It doesn't matter if you live 500 years. They're going to be short and miserable years. When you stop seeking the blessing. When you stop seeking the blessing. So as we look at this, I ask myself questions, and I want to ask those questions of you too. Don't answer anything. This between you and God. Have you reached a place in your life where you're coasting, or are you pursuing? Are you coasting? You're just going through the motions, or are you pursuing? Have you read the Word lately and had something really come alive to you? Have you been just lost in worship somewhere in the past week? Where you just feel God moving. You know He's there. You can just feel His presence right there with you. How long is too long before you're ready for that again? Are you in a place where you're coasting, or are you pursuing? Are you prevailing with God and with man? What I mean by that is, what's going on in your life? Are you living on yesterday's faith? Yesterday's blessing, yesterday's sense of direction, or have you come to the Father and say, God, I need new direction for today's battle. I need a fresh word from you. I need a fresh direction from you. And I'm not saying looking for alternate revelation outside of the Bible. I'm not saying that. But the Bible is living. And it has a way of really getting in there, if we'll let it. And are we prevailing with man, or are we leaving a long slew of people that we have problems with? Every time we speak, it's something bad about somebody. Never can say anything good, it's only bad. Only see the worst in everything. Life is full of struggles, but are you prevailing? See, last year is closed now. But as for you and your house, are you prevailing in struggles? Are you seeking the blessing still? Or was seeking the blessing something you did yesterday? Are you seeking the blessing still? Are you prevailing now, here? See, and this is something that I have gritted my teeth over and pulled out hair. It doesn't matter if God answers. It doesn't matter if God gives you the answer to the question that you really want answered. Those things are nice to have, but they will not be your source of comfort and hope. Okay? It doesn't matter what you're going through, what you're seeking God about. God giving you the answer is not going to fix the problem. It's like this. People go to counseling and they say this: why am I having this problem? And then the counselor tells them, usually something they don't want to hear, like, well, you're retarded. And it's like, I knew it. Or you have autism. Or, this thing happened when you were a kid or whatever. And, they know because they deal with those things. They know brain things, whatever. I don't tell the doctor how to do his job. I probably shouldn't tell the brain doctor how to do his job, so they'll tell you these things of why it happened. That's good. But how is that going to help you change? Sometimes people go to counseling, and I say this being a pastor where people will come to me for counseling, and they don't actually want to change anything. They just want to understand why they're having the problem and then go on with their merry way. See, a lot of times we want God to give us these answers when the answer itself, even if God does give it to you, isn't going to give you the peace that you think it will. If God gives you everything that you want, that's not going to fix it. Rather, what matters is that you hear from God. When you read through Jacob's story, you see all these bad things happen, right? You see all these good things happen. But when you see Jacob prevailing and getting victory, he is seeking the blessings. He's prevailing over his problems. He is prevailing over his problems with God. He's prevailing over his problems with man. It matters that you hear from God. Now, I'm not saying stop asking God questions. I'm not saying that. But if you're in a place where you're going through a dark pit, which a lot of us are, and your prayer life has devolved into nothing more than asking God why and criticizing what's happening, you probably aren't going to hear from God. If you turn it into a pursuit of a blessing, you'll hear from God probably. It'll take time still, but you'll hear from God. Might take time. And that's what really matters. It matters that you hear from God. It doesn't matter that you understand why you're going through this. All the questions are answered. How you can possibly be 130 years old and still be miserable, none of that really matters. What matters is that you hear from God. You're pursuing the blessing. See, Jacob, and this is where we're going to close on. This is a big idea. Really big idea. And I want you to really get this, okay? We're getting ready to draw it in. I know I've been going for a little bit, but really pay attention to this bit. Jacob was blessed by God, right? Okay. Hey, yeah, I'm changing your name, all right? But he was left with a limp. He prevailed over God and man, but he was left with a limp. He pursued the blessings and he achieved them, but he was left with a limp. Really big idea. I want you to get here, okay? See, even though he had that limp that he had to struggle with for the rest of his life, what was he called? Was he called Limpy? No, he said, your name is Israel because you have prevailed. See, he wasn't known by his weakness. He was known as Prevailer before the eyes of God. When God looked at him, he saw Prevailer. He didn't see man with a limp. And the limp, obviously I'm being a little bit metaphorical with the limp here, because there's two questions I want to ask. And this, once again, is something that calls for a little bit of introspection. First off, are you afraid of the limp? Are you afraid of the limp? I'll see God tomorrow. I don't want to mess things up. I just want to get through it. It's too complicated. I've been through some stuff. I just know what's coming. And you know what I'm talking about, where you reach that place of just kind of coasting. Are you afraid of the limp? The second question, are you moving forward if you already have the limp? And you know what I'm talking about. You see God, everything's going good. Things just blow up in your face. You're like, God, how could you let this happen? And you've emerged the other end. Your faith scarred, but stronger. Thank God didn't do things you want him to, and he kind of disappointed you in ways because you had your mind made up of how he should act, and he didn't do that. So you just kind of left with this guilt and anger and shame, and you don't really know exactly how to feel, and you just that's called the limp. Are you moving forward with the limp? Or are you saying, well, I'll do it when I get better, or I'll do it when I figure things out, or, everybody knows you can't pour into somebody else unless you're healthy. That's not true. That's not true. Well, I trusted in God, and God really let me down, so I'm just done. I'm done. Or I'm not like a non-Christian or anything, but I don't really want to seek anymore. Are you moving forward with a limp? Because it's good that you had yesterday's battles. It's good that you prevailed. But are you still moving forward with a limp? Do you still have another blessing you're pursuing? Or are you just kind of happy with where you are? Peter, when we look at the Bible, Peter was used most when? After he betrayed Jesus Christ, not before. Paul was used most when? After he was done persecuting the church, not before. Moses was used most when he was living in Pharaoh's house killing the slave masters? No. He was used most after his exile, after the limp,